And Dennis Healy, I've quoted this before, but in context, such world events as the crash of, he's talking about the 30s, but in the also 2008, such world events do not occur by accident. They are made to happen, whether it is to do with national issues or commerce, and most of them are stage managed by those who hold the purse strings. This is what's happening in Europe. It's happened already in America, and we shouldn't be surprised. This was the plan of Ben Gurion, which has been executed, but it looks like it's now unraveling after what's happened, and hopefully we'll see the end of that within the very near future.
We welcome back Tony Gosling. Welcome back, Tony.
Hi there. Now, I wonder if you've covered this, one of the sort of breaking stories that's been around on the internet the last couple of days, which is the possibility that the film footage that we've all seen that the Israeli army or the Israeli forces shot possibly was faked.
Yes, we have. Yes. We haven't covered it here, but we've seen it.
Yeah, because that, I think, is, I mean, we can't say for certain, obviously, whether it has or not, but it looks like there are some quite serious discrepancies between the actual detail of the boat, the ship, which all of the Gaza aid people were on, and the ship which appears in the footage. Some sort of nerdy types, I suppose, boat spotters or whatever, sort of equivalent of plane spotters, have pointed out several quite important differences between the actual shape of the boat, the ship, in the Israeli film footage and the actual ship which these people were on. Now, the suggestion is potentially that the film footage was actually shot several days beforehand and then released to the media as if it had actually been shot from the helicopters at the time that the raids took place. So, I mean, that's ongoing investigative work that's going on right now.
I actually looked at the... I actually looked on the IDF website, and they have this. They have some separate links, and they have a blog website, and on there they actually a discussion they had with the flotilla that wasn't accurate. So the first one that they released, when they said that the flotilla activists said go back to Auschwitz and remember 9/11, you blah blah blah. That wasn't actually true, and they had a second footage, and they said this is the actual real one. So I won't be surprised if it's true that that's a fake.
It's the Blue Peter syndrome. Here's one we made earlier.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
I think everyone needs to understand, as they probably do already. Many of your listeners will understand that one of the key aspects of modern warfare is this whole sort of media, is a sort of psychological operations they call it. It's a basically branch of the military where they use the window of opportunity, as they see it, within just sort of 2 or 3 days of a major incident. What they'll do is they'll make sure that they win the media war using images and video footage during that 2 or 3 days. And this is basically a public relations emergency management tactic. Say, for example, it's a sort of really a kind of marketing style way of dealing with things, which has been developed from things like nuclear accidents. Now, if you're running a nuclear power station and there's an accident, really, there's no good way you can spin it. It's really bad news. But there are people who are paid immense amounts of money to try and make sure that any kind of publicity that comes out in incidents like that is as good as it can be. And this is something which has been developed by big business for these sorts of purposes, and is now being rolled out into the military and to the political sphere. So, they realise this is the horrible truth that even if the film footage comes out in the next few weeks, which proves that the original footage was fake, but then by that time it's no longer news. So it may make a tiny bit of an impact on the international news scene, but actually most of the journalists and the editors will say, well, this is old news now. And this is a tactic which is being used increasingly, is to fight that media war in the first couple of days, the first few days after an incident. And then they realise, mostly accurately, that, well, if everyone, once that's been won, everyone's then forgotten about it. It doesn't matter if evidence comes out afterwards that disproves it, because in those first couple of days, there's a media feeding frenzy, and they will take almost anything.
Yeah, well, that's actually quite surprising, because on YouTube, after the flotilla incident, the IDF YouTube channel was the most hit channel for the whole day. So you can imagine, the other channels like Press TV that had the images, and Al Jazeera, they were about 500,000. But the IDF was in its millions.
But you see that the fact, the fact is, though, Maulana, these figures can be fiddled with.
Yeah, well, that's it. I highly doubt it, because the Press TV and Al Jazeera were out before, because they were live, and
I've
then
just
it
got
was cut.
a bit of audio here whilst Tony and Dawood and the gentleman here in the studio talking about media and obviously PR. We've actually got a clip here of David Cameron. I'm assuming that he's in Afghanistan, he's in the war zone himself, he's visited, and it's probably quite an old clip. I don't know. It was on the BBC. We know that much about it, and it appears to be a bit of a Freudian slip. I want to put it to the panel here, basically.
The 9/11 one.
Yes.
Have a listen to this. It's a very short clip, and make of it what you will.
Vital to ensure Britain's security.
And it's worth remembering why we're here, why we're fighting, what this is all about. This is not a war of choice, it is a war of necessity. This is not a war of occupation, it's a war of obligation. On 9/11, when the Twin Towers were blown up, and so many British people died as well as Americans, almost every single person that took part in that attack was trained here in Afghanistan by Al-Qaeda. That's why we came here. That's why we cleared away those training camps. And if we left tomorrow, those training camps could come back tomorrow.
Yes, we were hoping to speak to James Land.
When the Twin Towers were blown up...
Well, there you have it,
Trained
folks.
in Florida.
Oh, that was in Florida, was it?
Well, the hijackers were undergoing flying training in Florida whilst based at a US Navy Air Force base.
Yes.
So they weren't trained out in Afghanistan.
Well, let's go with David Cameron here. He's saying, is this a Freudian slip? Is this a gap? Because he doesn't use the word the Twin Towers were attacked. He doesn't use the words that it was a terrorist attack. He says they were blown up. So when the Twin Towers were blown up.
It may well be. In fact, I would say, from a public relations point of view, what they're probably doing is preparing the public for a slight change in the story about September the 11th. That maybe Al-Qaeda were actually also in New York planting bombs in the buildings, as well as flying the planes into the
that would be one way of debunking, wouldn't it?
Now saying right across the world that these buildings were brought down by controlled demolition and not by two fires that were almost out at the top of the building.
Well, if I can just butt in here. Yesterday I was reading on the Sun that the Taliban right now are buying infected HIV needles and putting it in bombs to hit British soldiers. So, I mean, can you see the level of, the extent they go to make up a story and to kind of justify, why we need to be there?
I read the reports of the Guardian.
HIV needles. How do you put HIV needles into a bomb? And then, it's just.
Well, it can't be done pretty easily if one wants to manipulate the situation.
Biological warfare.
I know, it's just so crazy. I think it's crazy.
But however, I mean, gentlemen, I don't know, Tony, if you actually have these, but there is this file going around, and it has been
from WikiLeaks.
From WikiLeaks, the cell phone record, the entire record of that day, the text messages that were sent to the people in the Trade Center.
That's right. Yes, they came out around about a year ago now.
Yes, they were.
And I don't know if you've noticed, but the Pentagon have now got a whole team of special operations. Basically, this is Information Warfare Department, which is attempting to destroy WikiLeaks. To make it possible for anybody with information which is incriminating about the US, particularly the US policy, also obviously Israeli policy and our own policies, to make it impossible for them to leak it to the public, because WikiLeaks, if people haven't heard of it, it's become an absolutely fantastic, brilliant website where you can make sure that information is put into the public domain if you believe that it may be criminal implications, and it may show criminal culpability of those in power. So, this is actually a brilliant facility, and the Pentagon is now trying to make sure it's stifling free speech as much as possible by trying to close the whole thing down.
Yes, because a few weeks ago we heard that one of the founder, I think, of WikiLeaks had his passport confiscated in Australia.
Well, actually, further to that, there's now much more recent news saying that basically the CIA are looking for him. They're looking for him.
Yeah, that's right. But you see, this is they're starting to get very, very desperate. WikiLeaks is actually a much-loved organ of freedom of speech, and it's a very, very powerful way to hold corrupt politicians to power. So you can see, if anyone is actually trying to close it down, they're not the good politicians, they're not decent people, they are basically flagging themselves up as crooks.
Well, when you, Tony, and I'd like to ask you guys this question to you both, Tony and Dawood, the more they try to suppress and close things like WikiLeaks, doesn't that incriminate them even further that they are trying to hide something?
Well, of course it does, yeah.
Yeah, I think what you have to remember is what the Prophet said. He said the time will come when it will be difficult to distinguish truth from falsehood. And this is weapons of mass deception. It's what's to be expected from the system that is built on lies.
Absolutely.
You say about history not being, or events being forgotten, yes. But we've just had the Savile inquiry, 198 million, 12 years. But it hasn't been forgotten by people, and eventually those things actually do bring down the kind of people. But we have to make sure that it is maintained in the public eye, not forgotten easily. But that's the game. It is a game that we have to win. And understand, you can't win the game, as Miles Copeland told me. He said Muslims and other people will not win unless they realize it is a game.
It's brilliant that you've brought up the Savile inquiry report, which has just come out today. Many of us, I mean, I've lived in Northern Ireland myself as well, knew that there was something extremely dodgy happening that day where the paratroops... The thing is also, I don't know if people know this, but any paratrooper, any soldier that lets off their gun at an inappropriate moment without being ordered to do it is fined. Something like 400, 500...
Yeah, it's actually called ND, isn't it? Negligent discharge.
That's right. And so there's no way that these paratroopers would have opened fire without express orders to do so. And I think the idea that these individual paratroops are responsible is just a way of passing the blame down the chain of command. So what I always do in circumstances like that is I look up the chain of command to see who was in charge that day. And if you do go up the chain of command, of course, eventually you come to the chief politician in charge of the army, who's the Secretary of State for Defence. And this is one of those fascinating occasions where it all starts to link up. The jigsaw pieces start to come into place, because the man who was Secretary of State for Defence on the day of Bloody Sunday was Lord Peter Carrington, who then went on to become, for 10 years, the chairman of the Bilderberg meetings. Yeah. So you can see that there's no way that the army could have done this without knowledge and support of Peter Carrington. And he, as Defence Secretary, I would say, is the man that the police should be interviewing and potentially arresting and jailing for Bloody Sunday.
Yes, they had the Widgery Tribunal, which was a whitewash. And this latest one, of course, is, as John Hume was pointing out and others, it may have cost that amount of money, but it's cheap when you consider that is life not more valuable than money. But
well, isn't the contrast, just a second though, isn't the contrast with what happened on the Gaza Aid Flotilla with Bloody Sunday quite fascinating at the same time? Because, of course, the Israelis want to set up an immediate inquiry, which is run by them, which is the equivalent of the Widgery inquiry for Bloody Sunday. The other thing is, the Israelis, exactly like the British Army was saying just after Bloody Sunday, are saying that they shot first. I mean, basically, it's just one or two little lies at the wrong time can create massive resentment. And, of course, what happened after Bloody Sunday was a massive, massive increase in the troubles and in bombings, because there were loads and loads of volunteers that turned up at the doorsteps of the IRA people saying, OK, we're now prepared to die for our country after what happened. And you can see that the actual tactics being used by the Israelis by doing these audacious and disgusting acts are really to try and fuel conflict. And it's a conflict that they know that they will win, because they have a superior military capability. But there's no way are they now going to be able to win hearts and minds.
Look, the Israelis have a master plan for many centuries, and they are masters of deception. And also, you have to remember that they have encouraged and financed organizations like Hamas and like others, because once you fuel that opposition, you can then expropriate their property and land, which is what is part of the policy. And Arafat knew this. We spoke about this in Khartoum with George Habash and others. But they were stupid. Yeah, unfortunately, the people, the Arabs, the Palestinians have been stupid because they've been falling into the trap that's been set for them for decades.
Yeah, so what should one do when confronted with these sorts of situations where you can see criminality? I think the answer is not to run to the IRA and say, I want to kill these people. It's to make sure that you accurately document all the evidence that you have of mistreatment, and then you ensure that the justice system operates. Now, it's taken nearly 40 years for it to actually get justice, finally, for the truth to come out. But that is really worth that long wait, because it must happen ultimately. I personally don't think that literally grabbing a gun and being angry is the way to react to that kind of treatment.
Yeah, don't get angry, get even, as the Americans say.
That's right. Use the justice system. And ultimately,
use the legal system. If we had a justice system, we wouldn't have a problem.
Fraudulent banksters are going to have to be arrested too.
Yeah. Well, the thing is that if you look at the Islamic Party website, the prediction was as soon as the Northern Ireland situation, which was a garrison situation to keep the country destabilized, as is Israel, as soon as the IRA bombed the city of London, there was a settlement within 6 months, and that was the only legitimate bomb that was ever set off. Was actually the enemy is the city of London, and has been for 800 years. And that was the prediction that we made, that there would be a settlement. And that after the second bomb, it was all over. And that's the only reason why we had a settlement. Otherwise, you'd still be having the same problems in Northern Ireland, because it suits certain people to keep conflict going. And war is a concomitant of debt-based systems.
No, I totally agree with that, yeah.
And this is the system that... the reason that I observe this is that we reclad this NatWest Tower twice, after the first bomb and the second, and then it was then at that point where you could see that the settlements, as soon as you attack the real enemy... Did you see Dispatches on Sunday?
Well, gentlemen, I'm afraid I'm going to have to stop you there.
Okay.
Time has beaten us again.
Just quickly, Dawood, you've got a show tomorrow on the radio, haven't you?
Yes, I have now 2 shows in Sheffield on Birmingham Community Radio.
What time is it? 10 till 12, I believe?
It's 10 till 12 on Wednesday, and Friday is 7 while 10. Now it goes out over the internet, and it's www.BirminghamCommunity, BCR 103.1 FM, and you can listen live to that if you wish. But the idea is that we're working along similar lines. It's not as politically charged as your programs are, but we have to then link up these bodies, because the networking is the key. We have to
absolutely.
I would just like to very quickly plug my show as well.
I was going to say that.
You beat us to it, Tony.
You beat us to it, actually, Tony. Because I was going to say Tony also had a show on Bristol radio.
I'd just like to say, I mean, last Friday, for example, we had a whole program about monetary reform and the fact that present crisis is totally unsolvable using the current system. There's something called the Bank of England 2010, which is up on the internet, which is basically a very, very simple system. If we change our monetary system, then hopefully, there will be no
It
problem.
could be solved within 24 hours, I can assure you.
And we do a politics program here, like I say, every Friday. The website is, if anyone wants to have a look, thisweek.org.uk. That's just one word, thisweek.org.uk.
.org.uk. And what time is that?
We're on from 5 till 7, but you can always listen to the podcasts afterwards. I mean, for example, with that monetary reform one, we've had loads of downloads from it because it's all very, very relevant to today's financial situation with these cuts supposedly about to kick in. I mean, this is ridiculous. If you start cutting Social Security, you're taking a massive load of demand out of the economy, and that means
Keynes
that
was able. Keynes understood the real...
You are listening to You Classified on Unity FM 93.5 Heart of the City. You are listening to an excerpt of Tony Gosling's radio show, Money Reform Acts 2010, with Bob Wellham, you can catch Tony 5 to 7 on www.bcrfm.org.uk. And for a full archive of Tony's shows, please check out www.thisweek.org.uk.
Welcome back to Friday Drive Time. We'll be having a listen in a minute to Prime Minister David Cameron's keynote speech earlier this week, where he explains, or at least tries to, why the drastic cuts in public services are necessary right now. The banksters, however, have got away with £700 billion of Treasury bailout money. The power to regulate the city as well has gone from the Financial Services Authority, which is funded by the banking industry, to the Bank of England, which is also a private bank, part of the financial banking industry. Anyway, so what's that, Martin?
The Bank of England is not ostensibly a private institution, unlike the Federal Reserve. You could argue that it's been regulatorily captured, that the City of London has an overwhelming influence on its policy, but it is officially part of the British government. It's not a private bank like the Federal Reserve.
So the Monetary Policy Committee, how's that decided on then?
Well, it's decided on by the Bank of England in consultation with the government. But it is a government institution. You could argue that it's a government institution which has been captured by the interests of the City of London. The Federal Reserve is actually a private institution masquerading as a public institution, but you can't say the same of the Bank of England.
What about the shareholdings of the Bank of England? Because obviously some people have shares in it. Do you know?
I don't believe they do.
This may be a good time to introduce Bob Wellham. Now, hi Bob, and welcome to Drive Time.
Hello.
Can you tell us, first of all, what is the Money Reform Party?
It's a group of individuals who would like to drastically change the way money comes into circulation, basically what money is. At the moment, our means of exchange, the numbers in your bank account, have all been borrowed into existence. Your savings are someone else's debt. Now, there's no fundamental reason why that should be the case. As a nation, as a trading community, a trading people, we can have our own means of exchange, which we issue for ourselves, debt-free, thereafter to use for our business.
So, Bob, why haven't I ever heard of the Monetary Reform Party before?
We're very small, I suppose. I can't really answer that question. Why is it not widely publicised by the mainstream media? I don't know.
And are there any decent journals where you can keep up with the issues that your party is espousing, or you know, where can people come across these kinds of issues being discussed, if not in the mainstream media?
Okay, well, you can go to the website, which is www.moneyreformparty.co.uk, all one word, Money Reform Party. And a recent development is people, some of whom are members of the Money Reform Party and some are independent, have formulated the Bank of England Act 2010, which is a formal proposal for the reform of our monetary system. It's been put together by very dedicated and very bright people, and I'd recommend that if you're interested in this subject, you go and have a look at it. That's at www.bankofenglandact, all one word, .co.uk.
And how about you then? What's your education and professional background?
Well, I'm a PhD mathematician who led a very normal sort of life in academia, in industrial research, and I earned money, I spent it, I invested it, and it wasn't until I retired that I had time to think about what money was. I realised that my 4 children were all financially worse off than I had been at their age. The newspapers were full of stories that individuals, corporations, nations were all in debt. So as a sort of logical thinking person, I wondered, to whom were they all in debt? It couldn't be the Martians, so that it must be that I don't understand money, and that motivated me to look more deeply into it.
OK, now, as promised, let's have a listen to the Prime Minister David Cameron speaking about the economy and explaining in detail why the axe must fall. And he did that earlier this week.
Now, I've been in office for a month, and I've spent much of that time discussing with the Chancellor, with government officials, the most urgent issue facing Britain today, and that is our massive deficit and our growing debt. How we deal with these things will affect our economy and our society, indeed our whole way of life. The decisions we make will affect every single person in this country, and the effects of those decisions will stay with us for years, perhaps even decades to come. And it's precisely because these decisions are so momentous, because they will have such enormous implications.
You are listening to You Classified on Unity FM 93.5 Heart of the City. You are listening to an excerpt of Tony Gosling's radio show Money Reform Act 2010 with Bob Wellham. You can catch Tony 5 to 7 on www.bcrfm.org.uk.